Gentlemen, hello and welcome to the Hide Site. I'm a United States Army sniper currently serving, and in today's video we're going to talk about target discrimination. Now in the previous video we talked about shot placement, right? Where to shoot on your target. Well, today we'll be talking about when having multiple targets, deciding who to shoot. Now there's 5 things we're looking to affect when it comes to target discrimination. That's going to be command, communication, lethality, firepower, special equipment, and then recovery and medical. Those last 2 kind of go hand in hand. So let's break down the first one. And we're going to look at multiple images here to kind of explain these. So the first thing that we can use to determine command or who's in charge is body language, specifically the body language of the individual, right? So leaders love to point. So here are some great examples of who is obviously a leader, right? They're usually standing the tallest, pointing, directing, physically moving people. So these are some great examples of individual body language that kind of is a dead giveaway that this guy's in charge. So if I'm looking to affect the command structure of an element, right, I'm going to look for this guy who is standing upright, who's pointing, who looks like he's giving direction. So what about the body language of the element, right? That's another indicator as far as to who is in charge. So notice how everyone is facing this one guy at the center, right? Who everyone is looking to is usually going to be an indicator of who is in charge, right? So here's another example of group body language, right? This is, I believe, these look like some Middle Eastern fighters of sorts, right? And so again, if you look at the body language of the group, everyone is kind of oriented towards the center. Well, who is at the center of this attention, right? Big guy here with the walkie-talkie and the badass capris, okay? So if I'm looking at this element, right, and the body language indicates that big guy here is in charge, well, that might be who I shoot first. Now, another thing that we can use to determine who's in charge is positioning within the element, right? For example, here's a group that has occupied a hasty battle position. This guy has placed his saw gunner, and he's got 2 riflemen off to that saw gunner's right. And so what's a giveaway that this guy down here is in charge is that, you know, an NCO or a team leader or what have you is the manager of that element, right? He manages every individual within that element. So notice how this guy has kind of placed himself behind that forward line so he can see everybody, right? So he can manage each individual. That's kind of an indicator that this guy's in charge. Another indicator, which we'll get into, is also communication, right? We can see that this guy's got an antenna on his back. No one else does. Probably an indicator that this guy is a leader of sorts. This guy has his element online, okay? All oriented one way, right? Focused on what's in front of him. And notice how this guy, you know, not really in a sort of battle position, right? Rifle down by his side. He's looking down the gun line, right? Another indicator is the communications that he's got. He's got a headset for talking. But yeah, you can just kind of tell by this guy's positioning within the element that, okay, this guy has some sort of authority. This is just kind of standard procedure really for not only the US military, but most developed Western militaries, right? Is when you take contact or when you occupy a hasty position, right? You're just going to get all your guns online and you're going to orient towards the threat or wherever the threat may come from. And so we've seen a couple examples of that. And here's another one, right? Now, what's a giveaway that this guy on the knee or on his knee is likely a team leader is that he is just behind the saw gunner, okay? Because again, positioning. The first thing a team leader is going to go to or manage is going to be his saw gunner because it is a mass casualty producing weapon. It's the highest or it's the most firepower that he has in his team is that saw. So that's what he's concerned with the most. So an indicator that this dude is the team leader or in charge is the fact that he's kind of just off this saw, just behind it, okay? And then of course, again, communications, right? We do see he has a hand mic, which kind of confirms this suspicion. So I'm gonna suspect that this guy on a knee is the team leader, and considering he is giving direction or talking to this guy standing who also has a radio, it's pretty safe to assume that this guy is the squad leader who is standing. He's likely superior to this guy on a knee. And from what I can assume with this perspective or this image is this team leader and placed his guys, got him online, and this squad leader has now run over to his team leader and he's maybe giving guidance, maybe he's asking for a lace report, For those of you that don't know, a LACE report is simply asking, hey, how much liquid does your team have? How much ammo does your team have? Do you have any casualties? And are you good on equipment? All of these questions allow him to reconsolidate between teams and then maybe send that report higher so they can track the status of that squad. So based off of everything that I've just laid out for you guys, I'm going to conclude that this guy on a knee is the team leader and this guy standing is the squad leader. And so if I'm going to shoot anybody, it's probably going to be that squad leader. We've talked about body language. We've talked about positioning, okay? One last indicator can be equipment, okay? And that's through the context of maybe a few things, but most of the time it's probably comms. So if we look at these guys, right, we see 4 fighters, okay? Now from right to left, we see AK, AK, AK. This guy has no weapon at all, but he has a radio. So that indicates to me that this guy, for some reason, has some sort of authority, or he's a coordinator in some way. He's talking to other elements. Okay, so that tells me that, okay, these guys are just trigger pullers. They really have no significance. This guy's probably in charge. So we're gonna drop that guy. So moving on from command, we're gonna talk about communications. Okay, we see a British element assaulting some type of objective, okay? Now, if we look at this group within the context of communications, this guy with the headset likely has a smaller radio. Now, what's really important here is that this guy on the far left is carrying an assault pack with a large antenna. You see, no one else in that group is doing that. So that indicates to me that this guy is the RTO. Now, if we want to affect communications, like I already established or laid out for you guys, well, there's a few radios in this group. However, let's differentiate. This guy might have a headset, but he doesn't have a large radio. I know that because he doesn't have a backpack. He probably has a small, about brick-sized radio meant for internal comms. So that small radio is just meant for talking in between the squad, maybe talking in between the platoon. He likely does not have the capability to communicate to higher echelons at longer distances. Now, this RTO does. He likely has a large radio. Again, he's got that large antenna, so he can communicate to higher echelons at long distances. Now, what that allows for them is, let's say I bog these guys down. Let's say I put them under some precision fire. Well, if this RTO is left up, right, what's way they can respond to me shooting at them? Sure, they might attempt direct fire. However, maybe I'm out of range, okay? Then direct fire is going to be inefficient. Another way that this element can respond to me shooting at them is calling for fire or artillery. Well, guess what they can't do if they don't have long-range comms, right? They cannot call for fire. So if I drop this guy, if I isolate him and his large radio, this element can now, they no longer can directly talk to that artillery unit, right? Or elements that could call for fire. Okay, so what they're forced to do now is they might still have that internal communication. They might still have those small radios. So perhaps they could call to another local unit who could send up their call for fire mission for them. But what I've now done is I've delayed their ability and hindered their ability to call for fire effectively on me. So, you know, stuff can be lost through translation, through multiple elements, etc. So again, I'm going to drop this RTO because it denies them the ability to communicate to higher echelons. And then we've also got this guy, right? So again, nothing really sticks out at me in terms of who is in charge. I don't really see any crazy weapon systems. I just see kind of a bunch of guys lounging around. I believe that guy way in the back who's pretty blurred does have an antenna on his back, but I don't really have a good sight picture of him. So if I just see a bunch of dudes sitting around doing nothing, and then I've got one guy who's very obviously talking on a radio, that's going to be the guy that I drop first. So we've talked about command and we've talked about communication. So another thing that we are looking to affect is that element's firepower, their lethality, or their special equipment. So for example, if I'm observing 3 guys in a trench oriented towards me, right? So for example, this image, and I see AK, AK, PKM, right? I'm going to engage that guy with the PKM first. Well, why? Well, one, it hinders their ability to affect friendly forces, right? I've now taken a PKM out of the fight. But additionally, let's think through, okay, what if they respond to my fire, right? What if I engage and then they try and respond and shoot back at me? Well, let's think about it as, okay, what would I rather be shot at by? 2 AKs or a PKM machine gun? The answer there should be pretty simple, right? I would like a machine gun not to be shooting at me. So that's the guy that I'm going to drop first. And we'll take a look at a couple other examples of this. Same concept, just different weapon system. If I'm observing 2 guys, one has an AK and one has an RPG, okay, what would I rather be shot at by? RPG or AK? Again, the answer should be pretty clear there. So I'm going to shoot at the guy with the RPG first. And again, this isn't just about me. This is also denying them that lethality or that firepower, so they also cannot affect friendly units as well, okay? We'll look at another example. However, not through the lens of lethality or firepower. Now let's kind of think special equipment. So for example, here we have a drone team. So let's say I'm observing an enemy element and I'm kind of picking apart who's who and whatnot, and then I identify this drone team. Now let's think about, out of these 2 individuals, who probably is more important. So this guy in this situation is honestly just a retard, okay? We have drones in my platoon, and it's the same way. You've got your drone operator. However, he gives some random guy the drone. He says, hey, go walk out that far. However, hold the drone up. I'm going to take off. Okay, so this guy, from what we see, doesn't really know anything. Okay, all he's doing is just holding the drone. Now, this guy, however, has 2 very important things. One, he's proving to me, just by being the operator, that he knows how to operate the drone. He's trained and familiar in some capacity. Okay, and he's proving that by physically holding the remote. Because not everyone in that element may be a drone operator or trained in such things. So that's one reason why I'm going to target this guy. The second reason is because he has the remote. He physically has the controller. So if I isolate this guy, if I engage him, I put him in the dirt and his remote falls to the ground, okay? I've now denied that entire element a drone, because that element, right, if they want that drone up, is forced to go get that guy and his remote. And as I've said, if I've isolated him, this creates targets of opportunity, which we've talked about in a previous video, right? If guys feel the need to come get him or come get that remote for that drone, well, now I've got another target, okay? So let's continue to talk about special equipment. So another example we have here, a dagger. So for those of you that don't know, a dagger is an encrypted GPS device that an element can plug in their entire route for a mission in, and then their lead guy, their navigator, can just follow it off this GPS. Now these are, I believe, slowly being phased out in a lot of militaries, right? A lot of modern militaries are using ATAC, right? They're using unit phones that has some sort of GPS deal on it. So different militaries use different stuff, but the point still stands. If I identify whoever is navigating the element with whatever piece of equipment, well, I've experienced this firsthand. I can almost guarantee you that every other dumb fuck with a rifle in this element has no idea what's going on. They probably have no idea what the route is. They have no idea where to go. And again, speaking from experience, it's very plausible. So this confirms to me that this guy knows the route, and he has a device that's going to help him do so. So if I can isolate this guy, if I can pick this guy off and isolate that piece of equipment, I've now denied that entire element the knowledge of their route, because it's possible that a few guys in there are familiar with the route. Maybe they have a second dagger. I would hope that the platoon leader or the squad leader would also know the route, sure, and it's possible they do. But this is just one more, this is one less guy who's familiar with the route, because I almost guarantee that all the Joes or the privates in that element have no idea what's going on. So again, this is, if I isolate him in that piece of equipment, it's going to force people to retrieve it, because they have to if they want to continue that route at some point. Okay, another example of special equipment. Now this one is very different from what we've been looking at so far, and I don't know a lot about law enforcement, so some police officer in here might say, oh well, we don't, another guy might be carrying a door wedge. I don't know, that's plausible, okay? However, again, we're just trying to think about this through the lens of special equipment. Okay, so if these guys are going door to door, okay, well, this guy's got a battering ram. All right, they're probably going to need that. So if I can isolate this dude with that battering ram, it's going to prevent them or inhibit them from going door to door, because they're probably going to need that battering ram at some point. So this is the idea when it comes to special equipment, is is identifying what really sticks out, what this element is going to rely on pretty heavily, and then isolating that piece of equipment or that operator. So moving on from firepower, let's talk recovery and medical, which again kind of go hand in hand. So recovery kind of depends on positioning in terms of against their environment. So for example, we could totally apply our target discrimination to this, okay? Nothing really sticking out as far as body language or who's in charge, but what really sticks out at me is that this guy has his whip fully extended, okay? And this guy doesn't. So that tells me that this guy is maybe communicating to someone to some degree. So that's gonna be the guy that I drop first. Now, in addition to this, when we talk about recovery, we'll notice how their entire body from head to toe is exposed, okay? So if I drop him and he lays there, still, even laid out in the prone, his entire body is exposed. So what does this mean for me? There's nowhere for them to hide. So if they feel the need to come get this guy, recover him in some way, drag him away, apply first aid, whoever feels the need to do that or does it is going to be completely exposed to me. So we've talked about equipment, but also let's think about, okay, do I need to wait to engage this element, right? Because maybe they're walking through an area that allows a lot of cover, and then I notice that the path they're taking at some point will open up. So instead of just capping them right away, I'm gonna wait till they get out into that road. I'm gonna wait until they walk out into that soccer field or what have you, right? So positioning of the element is also something that we're going to think through. Now let's talk about the medical side of things. Now, again, some of you, because I've gotten it in a previous video, talking about the morality of this, that it's questionable, that we've signed the Geneva Convention, is this sort of thing really allowed? Listen, this is reality. This is a part of the job, despite there being rules. I'm not saying if I go to war tomorrow that I'm gonna be popping medics, okay? But this is a side and a part of this job that cannot be denied, okay? It exists. We're not gonna pretend that it doesn't exist, okay? This is a part of the job. So we're gonna talk about medical, all right? So let's say, for example here, we have a casualty. Let's say I caused that casualty and I've got them in the wide open, and now their medical personnel have responded to this. Now, typically it's going to be a grunt that responds to a casualty, right? They're usually not just gonna send their medic right out there after this dude gets popped, because it just doesn't make sense. But there's some ways we can maybe confirm that I'm looking at a medic, okay? For example here, this guy's carrying a litter. Now, this isn't always the case, right? For example, in the US military, grunts, right? Your generic privates will carry litters, so it's not always an indicator that this guy's a medic, but we can kind of observe their equipment to maybe confirm that we're looking at medical personnel. So another form of equipment that we can look at, right? Another giveaway, at least within the context of the US military, is these clothing scissors, these clothing cutting scissors, okay? Each individual in the Army is issued an IFAC, or an individual first aid kit. Now, what's not standard issue in those kits is these scissors, okay? Now, are there maybe some examples of grunts carrying scissors? Of course, but your average grunt is simply just not putting scissors on their kit. So that's usually an indicator that this guy is medical personnel in some way. Another indicator that the individual is medical personnel would be the bag that they're carrying. You see in the US military, there's a standard medic bag, which is what this guy is wearing here. And if you can see, he's actually carrying a pair of scissors in the MOLLE on the back. So now, is every medic using the standard medic bag? Maybe not, but I am sure that your average westernized military has some sort of standard first aid bag that is carried by medics, which would confirm your suspicions that this person is medical personnel. Now, what you do with that information is ultimately up to you. So that kind of concludes target discrimination. And yeah, I've been yapping for a minute, so I hope you guys were kind of following where I was getting with this. And now what I'll leave you with is this principle at its core, okay, means when I've identified an element, I'm not just popping the first guy that I see, right? I have a lot of options to weigh. Is this element about to overexpose themselves, right? If I let them walk a little further, are they going to be in the open, right? So maybe waiting to engage. for the right moment. And then in addition to that, if I have multiple targets, again, not just popping the first guy, I'm going to weigh my options. I'm going to rank these guys. Okay, who's got the biggest gun? Who looks in charge? Who looks like they're communicating to higher echelons or different elements? Who's maybe a medic, right? Who maybe has the ability to recover a casualty? I'm taking all of these things into account, and then I'm ranking these individual targets, and whoever ranks the highest, whoever would cause the most amount of damage, cause the most amount of disarray, confusion, who would affect this element the worst if taken out, right, is who I'm going to engage first. So with that, a lot of rambling, but I hope you guys kind of followed the subject and that you found it interesting. And with that, thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you guys in the next one.